One more time, everyone together.
We seem to be without glitch, I think. Please God. Not having the problems of last night. So far, so good. Let me know if things are freezing up. Hello, my holy sisters and brothers. A good Vach Shavua Tov. It's great to be with you, and I pray that we will be able to do today's class unlike yesterday. A few people said in the comments, 100% right. When we have these, insurmountable, seemingly causeless glitches, God has a reason for them. We just have to have faith that there was a reason we couldn't get together last night. And then later last night, I was sort of going over the story that I wanted to tell you. And I think I'll be able to tell it better, a lot better, for having had a little extra practice, as it were. So how's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we get together to do 2 pages of the Talmud last night and today on a Sunday night? Melissa in Great Neck, James in Indianapolis, Pauline in Arkansas, Stephen in New Hampshire, Lucy in Minnesota, Yehuda in South Carolina, Paul in the Great Northwest, Bill in mid-Missouri. Paula loves the music. Mike says no glitches. Baruch Hashem. Barbara in Boston. Renee in Indiana. Sharon in New Jersey. Tom says Shavua Tov. Paula last night spilled milk. Fingers crossed. Yes, God has a plan. And TG in New Orleans. Over there on the YouTube side, nobody tuned in yet. Okay, things seem to be running. We're back on track. I'll just mention, what are we involved in during these 5 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot? Getting ready for Sukkot, or Israeli pronunciation Sukkot. So we've got our sukkah up. Still got to get the lights into it, the decorations. And today, just an hour ago, I was getting the lulav and esrog that we spent a lot of time talking about when we were in Tractate Sukkah. This is a really beautiful palm branch. I'm not going to open it yet, just to keep it as sealed and moist as possible for the holiday. It's kind of an extra large palm branch that you can see in its wrapper right there. And then along with it, right, so we have, these are the arava, the willow branches. As we learn, a willow by the brook, not a willow from the mountain. And these are the hadas, the myrtle branches. Some just use, a couple of these branches. This is more willow. But we actually do it the Chabad way, where we really wrap up the... I have more of these, I think. We really wrap the palm branch in the hadas, in the myrtle branches. Makes a nice thick bundle. It's very beautiful. And then this is the esrog that just kind of called to me today. I looked at a few, and then as soon as I picked this one up, there was something about it. I love this round shape. It's a little rounder than we usually get. Sometimes they're more elongated, but this is a very beautiful, beautiful esrog. You can see it right there. So those are the 4 species: the branch of the date palm, of the willow, of the myrtle tree, and the fruit of the esrog tree. In English, a citron. Okay, that's prepared. As soon as our class is over, I'll actually put those in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow I'll tie up the bundle, and I'll be using these ties made from the date palm tree, from the palm leaves. And then these will kind of wrap around the date palm and hold the willow branches and the myrtle branches together in a nice package, as it were. And then during the holiday, when it comes time to fulfill our obligation of waving the lulav, as we talked about in Tractate Sukkah, we'll wave it in 6 directions: east, south, west, north, up, and down. And that's how we'll fulfill our obligation. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about yesterday, coming out of Shabbos, is a beautiful teaching that I learned from my Rav, from Rav Yekusiel Kalmanson, yesterday morning in Shul. Right. So first of all, we learned that these 5 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, the Midrash says, very special days. Somehow these days are not part of the ledger, right? We've passed Rosh Hashanah. We had the 10 days of repentance for all of the sins of the previous year. Now we're in the new year, so any transgressions that we do this year are part of the ledger of this year, right? And then at the end, come the beginning of next year, when we get to the days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, any transgressions right after Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, presumably we'll have to atone for them next year during the days of awe. But not transgressions that happen between these 5 days, between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. In fact, these 5 days somehow are not counted. Now, obviously, you can't just go and make intentional transgressions. But why is it that these days, it's almost like, we're on this lofty level, and it's almost assumed that we won't make transgressions, and if we do make transgressions, they're going to be totally unintentional? I mean, one reason, of course, is we're coming out of that elevated state that we had at Yom Kippur, when we rose so high spiritually. The only day of the year when we have 5 prayer services, including Nila at the end, when we're kind of like thrusting our prayers through as the gates are closing, as it were. And then we learn, even though the gates have closed, right, the decree from the heavenly court is issued for us on Rosh Hashanah and sealed on Yom Kippur when the gates close. But there's a crack in the gates, and we can kind of slip in, additional prayers of atonement, of teshuvah, during this whole holiday season until the end of Sukkot. But there's also this idea, says Rav Yekusiel, that why do we ever sin, right? Why does a Jew ever transgress the commandments of the Torah? In a Midrash, our sages say the only reason we sin is because a spirit of lunacy overtakes us. Some translate a spirit of folly overtakes us. It's like our soul knows better, but our soul is confused in this world, and we basically have temporary insanity when we just disconnected from the teachings of our Father in heaven, and then we just go do whatever we want to do and give in to the evil inclination. It's only because we're sort of temporarily insane. Now, one could say, well, you're not so insane that you can't carry on your business. You can't carry on all sorts of dealings where quite, an acute understanding is necessary. You're going to say you're just temporarily insane when it comes to your transgressions, really? But during these 5 days, it's like everybody could agree we are temporarily insane, because what are we doing? We live in perfectly good homes, but we're running around like crazy to assemble these temporary flimsy homes that we're going to live in for a week instead of our perfectly good, reliable homes. And we're gonna, spend a lot of money on the date palm branch and the myrtle branch and the willow branch and this lemon-like fruit. That any other time of the year might just cost a few pennies, but right now, because you want the really beautiful ones, you're going to spend $50, $100. Some people spend crazy amounts of money on these things. Why? Because we're so filled with love and gratitude for our Creator. And so when we're involved in this kind of craziness, our misdeeds are excused from us, right? So that was the opening of the teachings for these days. That's how Rav Yekusiel opened Shabbos. But then we had a very special Torah reading yesterday, Ha'azinu. So this is the penultimate Torah portion of the year. And this is Moses, the last Torah portion. Moses is going to give his blessings to the 12 tribes, to the people in front of him. But the penultimate, Ha'azinu, Moses says, listen to my song, and I will tell you, and I want you to remember for all time, what will befall you throughout time. Right? And so Moses says in a very, very short, one of the shortest Torah portions that there is, I'm going to sum up human history and tell you what's going to be from now, when Moses is standing in front of the children of Israel. They're about to enter the promised land. Moses will not be allowed to go in with them. It's his 120th birthday. He's living the archetypal complete life. He has fulfilled his mission to bring the children of Israel there. God said he will not enter the promised land, and he wants to impart as much wisdom to them as possible. And then he sums it all. He's been speaking for a month. His final sermon takes a month. But the summary of his sermon to them is this 614-word Torah portion, Ha'azinu, which includes, most of it is a song. It's a song. Why is it a song? Says Rav Yekusiel, if I'm talking and you start talking, what do we call that? We call that interrupting. But if I'm singing and you start singing, what do we call that? Harmony. What we learn, the reason that Moses calls this kind of very short recapitulation or kind of summary of all of human history, at least from the Jewish perspective, meaning that we're very close to God. God gave, through the Jews to the whole world, a Torah which expresses God's will for the world. And the Jews are asked to fulfill special obligations because they are the custodians of the Torah and of the Holy Land. And they're going to do it for a while, and then they're going to wander off and just forget they're going to forget to be grateful for all the blessings that God gave them when he brought us out of slavery in Egypt and gave us the promised land. And we're going to forget, and we're going to neglect, and eventually we're going to lose the privilege, lose the right to live in the Holy Land, and we're going to be scattered among the nations in exile, and a massive list of curses, of terrible things that are going to befall us during those thousands of years that we're in diaspora. But our essential bond between us and God will never be severed, and eventually he will redeem us and bring us back from that scattering among the nations, back to the final redemption when the Messiah comes and we all enter the Messianic age. That's all summed up in that song. And our sages teach that song and this little Torah portion, Ha'azinu, contains all the wisdom of all the ages, and every person, every soul somehow is found in that Torah portion. All of us are in that Torah portion. Says the Kedushat Levi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who I've told some stories about him in the past. Why were the Jewish people scattered among the nations when we lost the right to live in the Holy Land? Why not just ship us all to some deserted island so we could, have a very nice, tight community? It would be very easy to keep all the Jewish laws and customs in a tight, insular community on some deserted island. Why? Because God wants us out there among the nations, giving the whole world an opportunity to hear the wisdom of the Torah, as we're doing right here and now. People find their hearts drawn to this wisdom. Wouldn't happen if the Jews were off on some deserted island that they then became Jew island, right? We're out in the world so that everybody has access to this beautiful wisdom. Now, how do we exemplify this idea that all wisdom and all individuals are found in this Song of Moses? An incredible true story. One of the great commentators in Jewish history was Nachmanides, known as the Ramban, lived about 1,000 years ago. He had many students. And one of them was actually an incredibly bright student named Avner, right? So the Jews call each other Reb, so you could call him Reb Avner, right? It's like Mr. Avner, but it's also a term of endearment. So Reb Avner was one of the Ramban's Talmudim, his students. And he was so bright, but he was also a skeptic. And when the Ramban taught this lesson, that everything can be found in that one Torah portion, all the wisdom, all the teachings of the world, and every individual, this skeptic young man said, you know what? This is nonsense. And that is the straw that broke the camel's back. You're telling me that all the wisdom of the Romans, the wisdom of the Greeks, the wisdom of all the foreign philosophers, all the wisdom of our sages, all of it can be found in this little 614-word Torah portion. Ridiculous. And off he goes, completely turning his back on Jewish life, Jewish culture, Jewish law especially. And he just goes his own way with a kind of anger and contempt in his heart for what he leaves behind. He's, like I said, a very bright and ambitious guy, and he actually goes out in the world and starts to get involved in politics, becomes very powerful in his political career, and eventually becomes the governor of that region of Europe where the Ramban was living. And on Yom Kippur, he sends his soldiers to fetch his former teacher, the Ramban. Says, bring him to me in my palace. The Ramban is deep in prayer in his synagogue. The soldiers come in, they drag him out, they take him to the castle, and they make him stand in front of the throne, right, of the regional governor, his student, Avner. What does Avner do in front of this holy man? The Ramban is just really one of the holiest rabbis in our history. What does Avner do right in front of the Ramban? Brings in a pig, kills it, doesn't slaughter it properly. There's no way to properly slaughter a pig, but make sure to kill it in a not in the normal manner of a kosher slaughter. Butchers it, roasts it, and eats it right in front of the Ramban, who is just crying, watching this display of contempt for the tradition. And through his tears, he says, my son, what did I say? What did I do? What have any of us done to make you so angry at God and his Torah? And Avner says, ha! I'm glad you asked, because I had my doubts. And then when you said that this ha'azino, this little Torah portion, contains all the wisdom of history and every individual in it, I knew that you were just full of it. And that's why I came out. And look at me now. I'm the governor. I'm rich. I have all these soldiers and servants to do my bidding, etc. And what have you got? You're just some little old man who was dragged out of his temple and forced to come here by me. And Reb Avner says, I don't know what to tell you. I stand by my teaching. All the wisdom and every individual is found in this Torah portion. Oh yeah? Then find me in your little Torah portion. Ramban puts his head down and he prays to God. Please. I looked at this Torah portion and I saw one thing. This boy looked at this Torah portion and saw a different thing. Please show me the truth in this Torah portion. Now, show it to me. And he was a great, great gifted scholar, and all the 614 words of this Torah portion were like just swimming in front of his mind's eye. And then God gave him this perfect clarity, and he saw it. Sort of came out of his trance, and he said to Avner, look at this verse right in the middle of that Torah portion. It's actually Deuteronomy 32:26. It's right in the middle. And he says, okay, it's translated like this. I said that I would obliterate them and erase their memory from mankind. Amarti afehem ashabita or ashabisa me'inosh zikaram. Okay, zikram. I said that I would obliterate them and their memory I would erase from mankind. Says the Ramban to Avner, look at the third letter of each of those words, right? How I taught it, how you learned it, and what God intended. Look at the third letter of each of those words. What do they spell? Amarti, third letter, resh. Afehem, third letter, aleph. Ashbisa, third letter, base. Me'inosh, third letter, nun. Zikaron, third letter, resh. What does it spell? Resh for Reb Avner. His name. The governor turned pale, started to tremble, realized that he had gone as far out of his way as humanly possible to offend the Holy One. And everything that the Holy One taught in his Torah is truth. What kind of life was he living? What had he done? And in his trembling and terror said to the Ramban, Rabbi, is there any hope for me? And the Ramban said, your answer is this verse. I said I will obliterate them and erase their memory from mankind. Governor Avner, the apostate heretic, needs to disappear from human history. Go and make your teshuvah, disappear from here. Go learn as you were learning when you were learning with me. Start over. There's always a place for you in God's Torah. And that's what Avner did. He ran off, he disappeared. The governor disappeared that day, and no one saw him again, and just started over in some new country, some foreign land. You know, there was no America's Most Wanted back then. He just completely started over and erased from the annals of history that governor who had been acting as he had. And why does it say not just Avner, but Reb Avner? Because at any time, no matter what transgressions you've made, God is waiting for you to come back. You can make your teshuvah. You'll be held accountable for your transgressions. But the Father loves his creatures. The Father loves his children and is always waiting for them to come home. And you can start over if you make a sincere atonement. And isn't it beautiful that this Torah portion has 614 words, right? 613 commandments, one more. What is that one more? It's what you bring to it. The Torah is not the property of the great scholars of the world. Like a song, it belongs to all of us. Every person can learn in it. Every person can add to it their interpretations, their teachings, their learnings, their lessons that they've taken from it. Everyone has what to contribute to the Torah tradition. Everyone has what to learn from it. And when we learn together, like singing a song together, it's harmony. Is that a great story? Okay, let's get to it. I indulged and took a little extra time to tell this story because the teachings from these 2 pages that we're going to be covering today, somewhat technical, and so I'm going to just focus on a couple of good areas in it. It won't take us that long to get through the page, and we'll have a normal length class tonight. Okay, tonight's pages are 18 and 19 here in Tractate Beitzah, the 8th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of festivals. We are in chapter 2, and we are going to be discussing Mishna number 2, opening and closing it, and then opening our discussion of Mishna number 3 here in chapter 2. Very well. We pick it up near the bottom of page 17 on the B side, where Mishnah number 2 of chapter 2 lays. Mishnah 2. If a festival occurs directly after Shabbos, i.e. on a Sunday, and one wishes to behave in a proper manner and purify himself and his vessels in honor of the festival, Beis Shammai say one must immerse everything before Shabbos. And Beis Hillel say vessels must be immersed before Shabbos, but a person may immerse himself even on Shabbos. Right? So vessels cannot be, like if a vessel was made tameh, ritually impure, and then what it needed was to be immersed in a mikvah to become pure and become ready for use, you can't do that on the festival, certainly not on Shabbos when you can't cook anyway. But a person who became impure can immerse himself or herself on a festival and even on Shabbos. And Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that one may bring ritually impure water into contact with ritually pure water in stone vessels on Shabbos in order to purify the water. Impure water can be purified if it is placed into a vessel that itself does not contract ritual impurity, such as one made of stone, and then lowered with the vessel into a ritual bath, the mikvah, and then the water becomes purified when it comes into contact with the water of the ritual bath. Although this is not considered proper immersion, water may nevertheless be purified in this manner. However, one may not immerse the impure water in a ritually impure vessel with the goal in mind of purifying that impure vessel at the same time. You can't do that. Likewise, one may immerse on a festival from one principle to another. We'll discuss what that means. And from one group to another. And we'll discuss what that means momentarily. That's the Mishnah. Here's the Gemara. In any event, everyone agrees, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree, that one may not immerse a vessel on Shabbos. Now the Gemara asks, what is the reason that one may not do so? Which type of prohibited labor does it involve? Right? What are the labors that are prohibited on Shabbos? The labors, constructive labors that were necessary to build the tabernacle in the wilderness. So immersing a vessel to purify it, what kind of labor is that? And Rabbah said, it is a decree, a rabbinic decree, issued by the sages as a preventive measure. So there's a fence around the Torah to protect people from coming to, unintentionally violate a Torah prohibition. So why do the rabbis make this restriction? It is a decree lest one come to pick up the vessel in his hand and carry it 4 cubits in the public domain to a ritual bath. So immersing the vessel in the mikveh isn't really some kind of prohibited labor, but the sages prohibited it because you might take that vessel and walk through the public domain in the absence of an Erev, and then you would have violated the Torah restriction on Shabbos. And Abaye said to Rabbah, if one has a pit full of water of a ritual bath in his courtyard, so that he's not going to have to carry anything through the public domain, then what is there to say? And Rabbah said to him, the sages issued a decree against immersing vessels even in a pit of water in one's own courtyard due to a pit situated in the public domain. If you let them immerse in your own little private mikveh in your backyard, Okay, so now you get the thought in your head. So you can immerse vessels on a festival, and then you won't have, the one in your backyard might dry up, and then you'll just go walking through the public domain and you'll come to violate Shabbos. So the sages said no to that as well. Abaye proposed a different challenge. He said this works out well with regard to Shabbos, but with regard to a festival, when there is no prohibition against carrying from one domain to another, because we saw that you can carry for the needs of the festival, as long as for the needs of the festival. In the beginning, we said we could carry for the needs of food preparation, but once they said you can carry for food preparation, you can carry for other purposes, as long as they're related to your rejoicing on the festival. But the point is we can carry. So if the issue is we don't want to come to violate carrying in the public domain, okay, but on a festival there's no carrying in a public domain. So why can't I immerse my vessels that are ritually impure and that I might need for food preparation during the festival? You decreed against it because I might come to carry, but on a festival I can carry. So why can't I immerse impure vessels during the festival? Rabbah replied, the sages issued a decree that it is prohibited to immerse a vessel on a festival due to the prohibition against immersing it on Shabbos. Since you got used to immersing vessels on festivals, you might remember that, on a day when no work is permitted, I can immerse my vessel. So I could probably do that on Shabbos as well, right? So then you might come to do it on Shabbos and carry and violate Shabbos. And so they said, now that we're saying no immersing vessels on the day of Shabbos, on the day that work is prohibited, likewise, it's going to extend to festivals as a protection. The Gemara asks, and do we issue a decree in such a case? But didn't we learn in the Mishna? And Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that one may bring ritually impure water into contact with ritually pure water using a stone vessel in order to purify the water. So we're allowed to purify the water. Okay, we can't use vessels that contract impurity. That's why we use stone vessels rather than metal vessels. But the fact is we're allowed to purify this impure water. Why can't we purify our vessels? However, one may not immerse the impure water in a ritually impure vessel in order to purify the vessel at the same time. And if it is so that such a decree was issued, let us also decree here that bringing ritually impure water into contact with ritually pure water should also be prohibited due to the prohibition against immersing a ritually impure vessel in a ritual bath. Since you're extending the fence a little further and further around the prohibition to make sure people don't come to make violations, why don't we decree against immersing ritually impure water, bringing it into contact with ritually pure water? The Gemara rejects this challenge. And how can you understand that there is substance to this question? If he has other good, ritually pure water to drink, why do I need to bring this ritually impure water into contact with the ritually pure water? Rather, one must say that he does not have suitable drinking water. And since he does not have other water, he is particularly careful about this water so that it not become impure. Therefore, perforce, this must be an exceptional case, as the water became impure despite the precautions that were taken. And the sages did not apply their decrees to unusual cases. They're not going to try to legislate every possibility, right? Just the littlest probability that something might happen, and we're going to issue big safety decrees that are going to limit everybody's freedom. No, we're just going to, sort of limit people's freedom and issue these decrees to protect them from violating Torah prohibitions for common mistakes that people would make. Abaye raised an objection from the following Beitzah. One may draw water from a spring or a ritual bath on a festival with a ritually impure pail, and the pail becomes ritually pure because while being filled with water, the bucket is completely immersed in the ritual bath. So there, we actually made an impure vessel and purified it by immersing it in a mikveh on a festival. If we can do that with the bucket used to draw water from the well, why can't we do that with our pots and pans? And if it is so that the sages issued such a decree, let us also decree that it is prohibited to draw water on a festival with a ritually impure pail, lest one come to immerse the pail by itself, not for the purpose of drawing water, but just to purify the pail. And Rabbah answered, it is different there, since it is permitted for him to immerse the pail only by drawing water with it. He remembers that it is prohibited to immerse a vessel by itself, and therefore there is no reason to issue such a decree. We don't have to be overprotective with these decrees. Abaye raised an objection from a different Beitzah, in which it was taught, with regard to a vessel that was rendered ritually impure on the eve of a festival, one may not immerse it on the festival. However, if it became impure on the festival itself, one may immerse it on a festival. Now, look at this. We may not purify our vessels on the festival. But this isn't talking about vessels that were already impure, and we could have purified them by dipping them in the mikveh before the festival started. But vessels that became tameh, ritually impure during the festival, okay, so we had no opportunity to purify them before the festival. They only became impure during the festival. And the sages permit us to immerse these vessels and purify them during the festival. And if it is so that the sages issued such a decree, let us also decree here that it is prohibited to immerse a vessel that became impure on a festival due to the prohibition against immersing a vessel that became impure before the festival. And Rabbah answered, contracting ritual impurity during a festival, when all the people are ritually pure because they purified themselves for the festival and they can purify themselves even during the festival. So how did these vessels become impure? It is an uncommon occurrence, and the general principle is that in an uncommon occurrence, that in the case of an uncommon occurrence, the sages did not issue a decree as a preventive measure. So we're seeing the kind of policy considerations. Common errors, the sages will issue a decree to keep people from coming to violate Torah prohibitions. Uncommon cases, they're not going to issue those rabbinic decrees. And then Abaye gave another example of this, and he will receive the same answer from Rabbah. In cases, Abaye is going to talk about the case of priests who are allowed to immerse or not allowed to immerse because of cases of derivative impurity as opposed to primary impurity. And the answer is going to be the priests are very vigilant about their own state of purity, and we don't have to issue rabbinic decrees to protect them from that. Then we're going to skip all the way to halfway down the A side of page 19 and some final thoughts on this Mishnah, Mishnah number 2. It was taught in that Mishnah that one may immerse on a festival from one principle to another and from one group to another. What does this mean? And the Gemara attempts to clarify the meaning of this statement. The sages taught in a Beitzah, how does one immerse from one principle to another? One who wishes to make his wine press, meaning to immerse and purify the vessels for the sake of his wine press, in addition to the purification of his ritually impure pitcher, may do so. What does this mean? In other words, if at first he merely intended to immerse his impure pitcher, because maybe he was using it for his olive oil press, or he's just going to use it for serving water at the table, but then because he has a wine press, because he has a vineyard and he's going to be bottling wine, and that wine has to be of a higher purity level because some of it is going to go to the priests, right? He wants that wine to be at a very high level of purity. Okay, so once he immersed the pitcher, okay, it was pure. It didn't need anything else. But he wants to sort of hold himself to a higher standard and immerse it again for the purposes of this higher purity. Do we allow him to do that? He may do so. In other words, if at first he merely intended to immerse his impure pitcher, but subsequently changed his mind, and he decided to use that same pitcher for his wine press, and he wishes to immerse the pitcher a second time for the sake of the wine press, it is permitted to do so. And similarly, one who wishes to make his pitcher in addition to the purification of his vessels for the sake of his winepress, he may do so. That is to say, if he originally intended to use the pitcher for his winepress, and after immersing it, he decided not to use it for that purpose, and now he wishes to immerse his pitcher a second time, it is permitted to do so. Why? Since the second immersion does not purify the vessel or fulfill any obligation, it is not considered a proper immersion, and therefore it is not prohibited on the festival, right? He already rendered these vessels pure before the festival began. And now during the festival, he decides, you know what, I want to immerse it again to get it to an even higher level of purity. That's almost like a make-believe custom. It's just, it's kind of an extra level of stringency, but it's not satisfying any Torah obligation. Therefore, it isn't really an immersion, and so it's not going to be prohibited on the festival. It's going to be permitted. Similarly, how does one immerse from one group to another? If one was planning to eat the Paschal lamb with this group, and remember that at Passover, you had to be registered with a group of people who were going to share the Passover offering, the Passover lamb, together. This group of people is going to eat this particular lamb. And then this guy's going to leave that group and join another group. So if one was planning to eat the Paschal offering with this particular group, and he immersed himself or his ritually impure vessels for that purpose. So now he's pure and the vessels are pure. But now he has reconsidered and he wishes to eat the offering with a different group. And so he says to that group, I'm leaving your group. And he says to this group, I'm joining your group. He does that before the festival. And now he wants to immerse himself or his vessels a second time for the second group. In such a case, he has permission to do so, even on a festival, for the same reason. Since this immersion is not obligatory, it is not viewed as an immersion at all, and so it's permitted. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 2. Now we're going to open Mishnah number 3. And the hour is late, so I'm just going to do the Mishnah and 2 quick Gemaras after it. I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. Mishnah number 3. Beis Shammai say, one may bring peace offerings on a festival, but one may not place his hands on them, semicha, as this is considered using animals, which is prohibited on a festival by rabbinic decree because it's like labor. However, one may not bring burnt offerings apart from the obligatory daily and additional offerings of the festival, because burnt offerings are consumed entirely on the altar and not eaten by people. And slaughter is permitted on a festival only for the purpose of human consumption, right? A burnt offering is burned entirely as a pleasing aroma to the Lord on the altar, only when the temple is standing. We haven't done this in 2,000 years. But according to Beis Shammai, since the exceptions to the prohibitions on doing labor, that the same prohibitions that we can't do on Shabbos, we can't do on a festival, the exception is for labor related to cooking, to food preparation, so we can rejoice on the festival. Well, a burnt offering, there's no eating by the humans, so it's not permitted on the festival. That's Beis Shammai's view. And Beis Hillel say one may bring both peace offerings and burnt offerings, and one may even place his hands on them, which is part of the offering procedure. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara says, and Ula said, explaining this Mishnah, the dispute between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai applies only to festival peace offerings, an obligation of the festival with respect to placing hands on them, and to burnt offerings of appearance, which must be brought over the course of the festival, and with respect to sacrificing them, shechting them. You can't slaughter them during the festival because there's no human consumption, according to Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai hold that the verse, Leviticus 23:41, you shall observe the Chag HaGoyim. You shall observe it as a festival to the Lord 7 days in the year, indicates festival peace offerings, chagiga, yes, they may be sacrificed even on a festival day, but burnt offerings of appearance, no, they may not. And Beis Hillel hold, to the Lord means that anything brought as an offering to the Lord may be sacrificed throughout the 7 days of the holiday, even on the actual festival day. But with regard to vow offerings and gift offerings, which are not part of the obligations of the day, all agree, even Beis Hillel, that they may not be sacrificed on a festival. And likewise, Rav Ada bar Ahava said, vow offerings and gift offerings may not be sacrificed on the festival. That could have been done before the festival. That could have been done after the festival. And so it's not permitted during the festival. But elevation offerings that are related to your love and gratitude to God for giving us this festival, and that's why you came to Jerusalem. It's a pilgrimage festival. Why are you at the temple during the festival? Because you're rejoicing in the festival. And in your love of God, you want to offer an olah, an elevation offering. And that's an offering, by the way, that non-Jews can bring as well as Jews when the temple is standing. That's going to be permitted during the festival. And as we learned before, why? So we shouldn't say that our table is full when our master's table is not full. What is our master's table? The altar that feeds God, as it were. He doesn't eat our offerings, obviously, but the fact that when our table is full, we want to also somehow share our abundance with the Lord is a beautiful spiritual desire, and at least Beis Hillel encourage it. Okay, that's what I've got today. Let me go to questions and comments. Mike A. Douglas said, transgressions, please elaborate the criteria of transgressions. The story that I was telling at the beginning of the class, that our transgressions during these 5 days don't count in our ledger of the transgressions of the year. What are we talking about transgressions? We're talking about sins, right? Sins. So a Jew has, 613 obligations. Many of them are not possible for us to do because the temple is not standing. But the ones that we're able to do, the positive commandments, that thou shalt do such and such, and then if you neglect to do it, transgression, or thou shalt not. Those are the negative commandments. Those are actually considered stronger, a little bit more important. And it says you shall not, and you do that thing like steal or lie or cheat people, have unfair business practices, or God forbid, big sins, sexual immorality, violence, etc. Those are transgressions, right? You're going to be accountable for them, but somehow, the expectation is if you do some kind of a sin, it's going to be a small one during these 5 days. And, the Lord is going to be extra forgiving with us during these 5 days. And the Kedushat Levi also said that another reason for this, the Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev said, another reason for this, that these 5 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot are special, is because on Yom Kippur, really, why are we making that big atonement? Because of fear, right? Like those days of awe, days of fear, in other words, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, when we realize how sinful we've been in the past year, and we're like, oh, God, I'm so ashamed. I did all those things. God, please forgive me. Don't hold it against me. Give me another year of life and health and prosperity. It's sort of coming from fear. But when we get to Sukkot, which is the festival of our rejoicing, there we're involved in a teshuvah, an atonement that's much more based on love of God. We want to please our Father out of love more than fear. And that's what links Sukkot to Yom Kippur. And so it's really only when we reach Sukkot that we get into the mode of teshuvah based on love. And that's why these 5 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot are a kind of bridge, a linking. And that's why we're kind of still in the days of awe, or the days of atonement, except that they're not called days of awe anymore, because now it's much more about love than fear. Yeah. Okay, it seems to be that that's all the questions that Nina's passing over to me. So that's what I've got for us tonight. No class tomorrow because it's Sukkot. Sukkot is starting. So the plan is to resume. We'll do the same thing that we've done like at Rosh Hashanah. We'll have a 3-day class Wednesday night. Right? So no class Monday night, no class Tuesday night. So we'll have 3 pages on Wednesday night when we come out of the first 2 festival days of Sukkot. Hopefully I'll be able to get this thing working in the sukkah. That's my goal. If not by Wednesday night, maybe we'll get it going by Friday afternoon. But we'll be eating all our meals in the sukkah starting tomorrow night. Tomorrow during the day, there's a lot of preparing to do. So no class tomorrow night. And we'll resume Wednesday night with 3 pages after I come out of Sukkot holiday. The same way we come out of Shabbos. That's Wednesday night. Chag Sameach. May you have a festive, joy-drenched festival of Sukkot. All the best.